Welcome back, everybody. I am Mohib, your trainer for this entire series. You are following me on Code with Mohib. Today, we would be starting with the introduction to framework, and we will also have a look on what a model view template is, and then we will have one introduction on Django. So this series is ideally not for computer science people, but anybody who is interested to or looking to start a career in web development. Feel free to watch this because we are going to learn a lot. But before that, please like and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to click on the bell icon to get new video updates. So let's get started. We have the term web framework, but some people or in some topics you can also find the name as web application framework. So these two terms or these two names, web framework or web application framework, are same. So what actually a web framework or web application framework is? So if we define a web framework or web application framework, we can say a web framework or web application framework is used to help us to build web applications. So it is a framework that by using this framework we can build our web application. A web application framework or web framework provides tools and libraries to simplify common web development operations, including web services and APIs and other resources. So we can say that it provides web application framework or web framework provides tools and libraries to simplify common web development operations. So we can also add one other thing, that web framework help us with the variety of tasks. So when we come to the term tasks, we can say that by using web framework or web application framework, they provide us templates in order to create our web applications. And web frameworks, they also have libraries for database access. So classes and functions will be provided to us. So by using those classes and functions, in other words, we can also say methods, we can access database. A web framework also has code for session management, through which we can manage our sessions. So we can add two other points, that web framework helps us with a variety of tasks. So what are these tasks, or what are the tasks that we can do by using web framework? These tasks are like templating, like it will create a complete directory structure for our web application. In the coming lesson, we will talk about how a directory structure will be created using the framework. It will provide us a quite nice framework that will give us the complete structure of the web application or standard web application. we can easily find where the code is written. The tasks can also be said as that web framework provide us some libraries through which we can access our database. Libraries for database. And web frameworks also have codes for session management, through which we can manage our sessions. Some of the frameworks that we can name them, for example, if you're using PHP, the framework that we can use in PHP can be named as Laravel. We also have another framework, CodeIgniter, or Zend. It is a framework that is based on PHP. With the people that they know the PHP language, then they can use these frameworks in order to develop or build web applications. Or Cake PHP is another framework that is based on PHP. For Java, we have other frameworks like Hibernate. It is a framework that is used for Java. Another demanding framework that is a Spring Boot, Spring microservices that we can use, microservice with Spring that we can use. We also have another framework that is based on Java, that is structs, and so on, like Play framework, which is also for Java. Developers, they are using C# or Microsoft technologies. They can use ASP.NET. It is a framework based on C# or it is Microsoft framework. Or we have ADO.NET. It is another framework used for Microsoft technologies. We also have another framework, web framework, that is ASP.NET Core. People, they are using JavaScript. We also have frameworks for JavaScript like Express.js. For short, we can call that Express, or you can say Express.js. We also have Node.js, or Next.js, or Angular.js. But because the series is about Python, so for Python framework, we have Django framework, CherryPy, it's a web framework, Bottle, this is another framework that is used in Python, and Pyramid, Flask, Tornado, or other frameworks, we can mention them here. Most of these frameworks or web application frameworks follow MVC architecture, or we can say MVC software design pattern. So most of these frameworks, I have mentioned them here, they follow MVC software design pattern or architecture. But in the case of Django, which is a Python web application framework, it follows MVT software design pattern or architecture. So what is MVT in fact? M stands for model. Let me put another board. MVT. So It stands for model, view, and template. So what is model, view, and template? Or what are they? In fact, model is responsible to handle database. It is a database layer. Through this, we can define our tables in database. In later lectures, we will talk about how model creates tables in database. That will be our coming lectures where we can learn how model is used to create tables in our database. So for model, we can add these points, model. So what is model? Model is responsible to handle database. In fact, it is a database access layer. And through this, we can define our tables in database. Before talking about view, I would like to talk about template, because once we know about, I'll talk about view later, but before that, let's talk about template. What a template is. Template. In fact, template is responsible about the presentation layer of our application, or this represents how data should be shown or presented to the application user. How data should be presented to user. Let me write here. It would be fine to write here, user. The second point that we can add here is that basically it is responsible for showing end user content. Showing end user content. It may consist of HTML, CSS, Bootstrap. Like, we can add or mix HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript with Django template language, that is for short called DTL. So it may consist of what? It may consist of HTML, CSS, JavaScript mixed with what? Mixed with DTL, Django template language. We will have a deep explanation of DTL and how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is mixed with this. So now that we understood about model and template, so this is the time to talk about view. So this is about model, this is about template, but what comes in between is view. I will also illustrate model, view, template in diagram. So what is view? The user can send request by interacting with template. So view handles these requests and send to the model, then get appropriate response from model and sends back to the template. So what does view do is that views handles the requests and sends the requests to the model. It means that when a user hits the URL, then view will handle the request. And in case our application needs an interaction with database, then the request will be sent to model. Model will get the data from database and send back to view, and view will send the data as a response to template, and template will show it to the end user. So it handles the requests, gets appropriate response, gets appropriate response, and sends response, get appropriate response from what? From model, and then sends the response to the template. Sends respond to template. For short, let me write TMP. In fact, view works as a mediator between template and view. Acts as mediator between, let me write between model and template. So let me show these three parts, or how these three work together. So assume the first scenario, that the user sends a request. How does a user send a request? A user will open a browser and type, for example, www.google.com. He will type the URL in the URL box. So the request will be sent to view. In case our application needs to get the data from database, then view will send the request to model. And model, so this is our view, this is model. Model will interact with database. Here is our database. Let me draw a database. It will interact with database. For example, it will get the data, like select so and so field or columns from database table. And then the database will interact with model. Model will send back the data from model to view, and then view will render all the data, give it the data to template. Here is our template, and template, so let me draw it like this so that you can understand. View will get the data and send it to template, and template will be rendered back to the view, and view will show back the data to end user. So indeed, view will show template to user. This is the first scenario in case user needs some data from database. So it will send the request to view will send it to model will get the data from database and will send back to view will send it to template will design it, and it will design the content, will send back to view will show back to, it will show to the user. Of course, template will be shown to the user. There is another scenario where the user does not need any data from database. So in that case, user will type the website URL in URL. So he or she will type the URL. After hitting the request, the request will come to view, because in this scenario we do not need to get data from database. Therefore, view will send the request to template. We will send it to template, and template will be rendered and will be given to view, and view will show the template to user. So in third point, we talked that, or we say that view is a mediator between model and template. This is a mediator between model and template. When we create our application, there I will show you how view is done, or where we should write the code that is related to view. So we can add some points here that in view, we always write server-side logic. So the data will be processed by GET and POST requests. It will get the data from user, for example, in case you want to insert some data into database. So it can get the data from user, or a user might retrieve some data from database. So view can get data from model as well, and pass all the data to template, and template will be rendered and will be shown to user. On the other hand, we have model. Model processes data, or we can say in model we write persistent logic. Like for example, insertion, how to insert data into database, how to update data into database, how to delete data, or retrieving data from database. This is simply called as CRUD operation. And the next one, the last one, we have template. Here, user interface code will be written, or the presentation logic will be written. The structure of web will be created here by using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So this is the scenario, or we can say the software pattern for model view template, or MVT. And there are some other web application frameworks. They use MVC, software design pattern or architecture. The question comes here, why to use MVC or MVT? So why to use MVC or MVT? The first thing that we have to know that by using MVC or MVT, code organization will be created. It means that we can have well organized code in our template or in our web application. This is the reason number one, organized code. The second reason here, on the other hand, we can say organized code means that it will have separate blocks. Separate blocks means that we will have different parts where we can write our database logic, presentation logic, and view logic. So the logic that is related to database will be placed in model. The logic that is related to view, that will be placed in template section, and the logic that is related to handling request and response will be written in view section, or we can say the server-side logic will be written in view section, which will handle the request and response in our web application. So for that reason, we call this as a separate blocks. On the other hand, while writing separate blocks, it will reduce complexity. It will reduce complexity of our web application. Once it reduces complexity of web application, so it will be easy to maintain and modify. So next one, it is easy to maintain and modify. So these are the reasons, and we have different other reasons that why we use MVC and MVT, architecture or software design pattern. So it was all about MVC design pattern. So MVC or MVT. But since we are talking about Django framework follows MVT design pattern or architecture. When we create our application, in our application, I'll show you the model section, the view section, and the template section, or the directories. I'll highlight them that this part belongs to model, the next part belongs to view, and the other part belongs to template. So now that we understood about MVT, let's talk about Django. What Django is in fact. Django is a free open source Python-based high-level web framework. As discussed earlier, that in every language we have different frameworks. So for Python language, the framework that is used is Django. We also have other frameworks, as I mentioned earlier, for Python, that we have frameworks like CherryPy, Bottle, Pyramid, Tornado, Flask, and so on. But in this series, we will talk about Django. So we can say Django is a free open source Python-based high level web framework. It was initially developed between 2003 and 2005 by a team who were responsible for creating and maintaining newspaper websites. So the time that was developed, it was between 2003 and 2005. Django follows MVT architecture pattern. As I discussed earlier, it follows Django follows MVT architecture. So this is the definition, or a simple definition for Django. But the question comes here that what can be built with Python? What can we build with Python? With Django. We can build high-end web applications. By using Django, we can create our web applications. There are multiple websites where they have used Django or Python. For example, Spotify is an example where they have used Django. YouTube as well, Bitbucket, Pinterest. These are the well-known websites that they have used Python. Of course, I would like to mention that they're not only built based on Python, but also other frameworks and integration of other languages are used but for developing these websites. So this is the content for today's video. In the next video, we will talk about how to install Django and how to create our web application. Bye and take care.